My friend's mom stood at my door holding wine, looking lost. Can I come in? I can't face being alone tonight. Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm 27, working at an architectural firm in the city. And I've always been the type who keeps things simple, work late, play guitar, avoid complications. Not the guy who gets tangled in impossible situations. Not someone who crosses lines that shouldn't be crossed. But I notice things, I feel things, and sometimes that's dangerous. I grew up knowing right from wrong, black from white, which is probably why what happened next still keeps me awake at night, wondering if I'd do it all again. Madeline was my best friend Ethan's mother, 45, elegant, recently widowed. Her husband had died a week ago. And there she stood, trembling slightly, asking to not be alone. I stepped aside. Of course, come in. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. I'd known Ethan Hartley since our second year of architecture school. 5 years of friendship built through late-night study sessions, shared internships, and countless conversations about our dreams of reshaping skylines. We'd stayed close even after graduating and landing jobs at competing firms, meeting for weekly basketball games and sharing industry gossip over beers. That's how I first met his mother, Madeline. She would visit the city every few months, taking us both to dinner at small Italian restaurants where the tables were too close together and the wine came in carafes. I remember how she'd lean forward, genuinely interested when I talked about my latest projects, remembering details about previous ones that even Ethan had forgotten. And how did that renovation with the curved glass wall turn out? She'd asked once, 6 months after I'd mentioned it in passing. Her green eyes had sparkled with curiosity, and I'd felt oddly pleased that she'd remembered. Thanksgiving at their Connecticut home became a tradition when my own family moved to California. Madeline would insist I come, saying no one should. Spend holidays alone in the city. I can still picture her in her kitchen, auburn hair caught in the warm light, directing traffic between counters with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly where. Everything belonged at Ethan's graduation party. She'd found me hiding from the crowd on their back porch. We'd talked about books for an hour while fairy lights twinkled in the gathering dusk. She had this way of making conversation feel easy, natural, like we'd known each other for years instead of meeting at scattered social occasions. When Ethan called 3 weeks ago, his voice cracking as he told me about his father's heart attack, my world tilted sideways. It felt impossible. Mr. Hartley had seemed perfectly healthy at Christmas, talking about his golf game and retirement plans. I remembered Madeline standing beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they'd said goodbye. Our friend group mobilized immediately. Ethan was on the first flight home, and we covered his work projects without being asked. I sent flowers to the funeral home and a meal delivery service gift card to their house, knowing how inadequate both gestures were. What do you give someone whose world has just shattered? The funeral was a blur of black suits and murmured condolences. I'd caught glimpses of Madeline, straight-backed and composed in her grief, accepting hugs with quiet grace. She'd looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable, though her elegance remained intact. When she'd squeezed my hand during the reception line, I'd wanted to say something meaningful, but all the words felt wrong. A week later, I was working late in my apartment, losing myself in the clean lines of a new residential complex design. My desk lamp cast a pool of yellow light across the blueprints, and I'd been making adjustments for hours, trying to get the flow of the community spaces just right. The city hummed 14 floors below, a constant companion to my solitary work. Session stopped a knock when it came. It was so soft I almost missed it. 3 gentle taps, nothing like the sharp rap of delivery people or the rhythmic bounce of neighbors borrowing sugar. I glanced at my phone. 9 p.m., too late for casual visitors. Too early for emergencies? I stood, stretching muscles, stiff from hours of hunching over drawings. That's when I heard it again. That hesitant knock. Like whoever was there wasn't quite sure they should be. I'm not sure why, but something about the quietness of it made my heart beat faster. I crossed my living room, past the half-empty coffee mug on the side table and the architecture magazine scattered across my couch. The hardwood floors creaked slightly under my feet, familiar sounds in a suddenly unfamiliar moment. Let me tell you about the strange feeling of standing before a closed door, knowing that when you open it, something's going to change. You can feel it in the air and the quality of the silence on the other side. I reached for the handle, cold metal against my palm, and turned it. When I opened the door, Madeline Hartley stood in my hallway, a bottle of wine cradled in her arms like a shield. She looked different from the composed woman I remembered from family gatherings. Smaller somehow, more fragile in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Her dark auburn hair was pulled back in a loose knot, and her black dress seemed to hang slightly looser on her frame. "I'm so sorry to intrude," she said softly, her voice carrying that familiar hint of warmth, despite the circumstances. "Ethan had your address written down from when I helped him move that sectional sofa a few months ago. I've been driving around the city for hours. I couldn't face my hotel room tonight." I noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she held out the wine bottle. Her eyes were rimmed with red, though whether from tears or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. The perfect composure she'd maintained through the funeral had cracked, leaving something raw and vulnerable in its place. "Please, come in," I said, stepping back to make space. "Let me take your coat." She slipped off her charcoal wool coat, revealing a simple black dress underneath. As I hung it in my entry closet, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something subtle and floral that reminded me of spring gardens. "Thank you," she murmured, glancing around my apartment with what seemed like genuine interest. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." I guided her toward my living room, where my worn leather couch faced the exposed brick wall. "Not at all. I was just sketching. Nothing urgent." She settled onto one end of the couch, perching carefully as if unsure of her welcome. I took the other end, leaving the wine bottle on the coffee table between us like a bridge across the distance. The lamp beside us cast a warm glow that softened the shadows under her eyes. "You have a lovely space," she said, her gaze traveling over the brick walls to my drafting table, positioned by the window. The light must be beautiful during the day. I reached for the wine bottle, grateful for something to do with my hands. It is. I chose this place mainly for those windows. They're perfect for drawing. The cork came out with a soft pop, and I poured 2 generous glasses. Madeline accepted hers with a small smile, her fingers brushing mine for just a moment. "I see her." Still collecting Architecture Digest, she noted, nodding toward the stack of magazines on my side table. "Ethan mentioned you two sometimes argue over who gets to keep the latest issue." Something in my chest tightened at how she deliberately steered the conversation away from anything related to her husband or the funeral. I followed her lead, grateful for the easy topic. "Old habits from school," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Though now we can each afford our own subscription, we still end up trading copies." She nodded, her eyes drifting to the city lights visible through my windows. "How do you like this neighborhood? It seems quieter than where Ethan lives." "It is. There's a great coffee shop around the corner, and the subway's just 2 blocks away. Living alone, I appreciate having everything close by." "Living alone, ... quotes," she repeated softly, then caught herself. "Do you cook much? This kitchen looks barely used." I watched as she took another sip of wine, her hand steadier now. "Mostly simple things. I'm better at ordering takeout than creating masterpieces." Her gaze continued its journey around my apartment, taking in the details of my life, the plant Ethan had given me as a housewarming gift, the framed blueprints on the walls, the stack of books beside my reading chair. When her eyes landed on my guitar propped in the corner, something shifted in her expression. "I didn't know you played," she said, genuine curiosity warming her voice. "How long have you been practicing?" The way she asked, as if we were just 2 people sharing a normal evening, as if she hadn't spent the past week burying her husband, made my heart ache. But I recognized her need to stay in this safer space, away from the raw edges of her grief. "I've played since high school," I told her, settling back into the couch, mostly jazz and classical pieces. "It helps me think when I'm stuck on a design." "Would you play something?" Her request was soft, almost hesitant. Ethan never mentioned. You were musical. I glanced at my watch. Nearly 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. But something in her expression made me set down my wine glass and cross to the corner where my Gibson rested in its stand. The familiar weight felt comforting as I brought it back to the couch. I've been working on this piece for a while, I said, positioning my fingers on the frets. It's not finished yet, but ... I trailed off, suddenly self-conscious about playing for her. Please, she whispered, drawing her legs up beneath her on the couch. The movement was unexpectedly girlish, at odds with her usual elegant reserve. I began playing, letting the melody unfold slowly, a contemplative progression of minor chords that opened into something more hopeful. The music filled my apartment, softening the city sounds beyond my windows. I'd composed this piece during late nights at my drafting table, trying to capture that strange space between melancholy and possibility. Madeline's eyes drifted closed as I played. Her wine glass rested loosely in one hand, balanced against her. In the warm lamplight, I could see the tension gradually leaving her shoulders, her breathing becoming deeper and more even. The light caught in her dark auburn hair, creating subtle highlights that shifted with each breath. Without her usual careful composure, she looked younger somehow, more like the woman in the photos Ethan kept from his childhood, before responsibility. And social expectations had shaped her into someone more contained. A strand of hair had escaped her loose knot, curling against her neck. The piece ended on a suspended cord that hung in the air between us. Madeline's eyes remained closed for several heartbeats after the last note faded. When she finally opened, then neither of us spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable, weighted with something I couldn't quite name. That was beautiful, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. This is the first time in a week I've felt anything besides numbness, or pain that's too sharp to breathe through. She took a shaky breath. Thank you for that gift. Setting my guitar aside, I watched as she unfolded herself from the couch, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. I should go. It's late, and you've been so kind already. I walked her to the door, retrieving her coat from the closet. As I held it out, she slipped her arms into the sleeves, then turned to face me. In the dim entryway light, her green eyes seemed darker, holding something, vulnerable and uncertain. Ryan? She paused, one hand on the doorknob. Would it be terribly inappropriate if... Could I come back tomorrow evening? Not for company, really. Just ... She gestured vaguely at my apartment. Just as to exist somewhere that doesn't echo. Absence. Every corner of that hotel room feels empty, and I can't. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she pressed her lips together, fighting for control. I recognized the raw edge of loneliness in her request, something I'd felt myself on quiet Sunday afternoons when the city seemed too large and empty. Couldn't focus on anything at work the next day. My mind kept drifting back to last night. The way Madeline's shoulders had relaxed as I played, how young she'd looked in the lamplight. During our afternoon client presentation, I fumbled through slides about sustainable materials, losing my place twice. You okay? My colleague whispered as we packed up. Afterward. That's not like you to space out during a pitch. I muttered something about lack of sleep and escaped to my office, where I spent the rest of the day pretending to review blueprints while actually watching the clock crawl forward by 6. I was back home, surveying my apartment with new eyes. I straightened the magazines on my coffee table, then felt ridiculous for caring. Arranged my drafting supplies, then messed them up again so they'd look natural. Changed my shirt twice before settling on the one I'd been wearing all day. The knock came at 8:30, earlier than yesterday, but with that same gentle rhythm I already recognized as hers. When I opened the door, Madeline stood there holding 2 bags of takeout Chinese food. The paper handles looped over elegant fingers. I remembered you mentioning how you forget to eat when you're working on projects, she said, a slight flush, coloring her cheeks. I hope I'm not imposing. Never, I assured her, taking the bags. The familiar scent of garlic and ginger filled my apartment as we spread white containers across the coffee table. She'd ordered enough for 4 people. Lo mein, kung pao chicken, beef, and broccoli, spring rolls still crisp in their paper wrapping. "Show me what you're working on?" she asked, settling onto the couch with her plate. I grabbed my latest sketches from the drafting table, spreading them beside the takeout containers. "It's a residential complex," I explained, "but I can't get this central courtyard space to feel right. The flow is off somehow." Madeline studied the drawings with surprising intensity, chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. "What if you shifted the entrance?" She traced a line with her finger, careful not to smudge the pencil marks. The natural path people want to take through a space is usually... She had an incredible grasp of spatial relationships, seeing solutions I'd been missing for weeks. Of course, she'd spent years curating museum exhibits, thinking about how people move through spaces, how art and architecture interact. "I didn't know you used to be a curator," I said, reaching for another spring roll. "At the Metropolitan Museum of Art before Ethan." Her smile held a touch of wistfulness. I loved it, the constant learning, helping people connect with beautiful things. "But when Ethan came along, ... She shrugged. Different choices seemed important then. Our conversation meandered naturally from there, her favorite exhibits she'd arranged. Books we both read recently, places we dreamed of visiting. She'd never seen Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. I'd never been to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. We traded stories about our worst travel disasters and most unexpected discoveries. The empty containers grew cold, forgotten as we talked. It wasn't until Madeline checked her phone that we realized it was past midnight. "Oh." She sat up straighter, surprised. I had no idea it was so late. "I should go. You must be exhausted." "Not at all," I said honestly. These hours had passed, more quickly than any in recent memory. She gathered her purse and coat, then paused. "I extended my hotel stay for a few more days," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "The house is just ... There are too many memories right now, too many empty rooms." Her voice held that slight tremor again, the one that made me want to reach out to offer some kind of comfort. But I kept my hands steady at my sides, maintaining the careful distance between us. "You're welcome here any time," I told her softly. "Really?" She nodded, composing herself. "Thank you, Ryan, for everything." Then she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of her perfume and the scattered evidence of our shared meal. I stood in my doorway for a long moment after she left, listening to the quiet click of her heels fade down the hallway, wondering what tomorrow might bring. The pattern settled into something comfortable over the next 3 evenings. Each night, between 8 and 9, Madeline would appear at my door, sometimes with wine, sometimes just herself. We'd talk for hours, losing track of time in the gentle bubble of my apartment's warm light. On the second night, I showed her my portfolio, projects I'd completed, some still under construction. She traced the lines of each drawing with genuine interest, asking questions that made me see my own work differently. Her curator's eye caught details I'd forgotten about, small choices I'd made instinctively. "This staircase," she said, pointing to one of my favorite residential designs. "The way it curves here, it's almost like a sculpture." The following evening, she brought her laptop, showing me photographs of exhibitions she'd arranged at the Metropolitan. Her face lit up as she described the challenges of spacing, lighting, the delicate dance of leading viewers through a carefully crafted experience. I found myself mesmerized not just by the art, but by her passion for it, the way her hands moved as she explained her choices, the spark in her green eyes. But on the 4th night, something was different. When I opened the door, Madeline's usual composed facade had slipped. Her shoulders drooped slightly, dark circles shadowing her eyes. "Long day?" I asked, taking her coat. She nodded, sinking onto the couch. "Lawyers. Estate matters." She accepted the glass of wine I offered, taking a longer sip than usual. So many papers to sign. So many decisions I never thought I'd have to make alone. Alone. I sat in what had become my usual spot, leaving careful space between us. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights twinkling beyond my windows. I found his reading glasses today, she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper, on his nightstand next to that mystery novel he started last week. He'll never ... double quotes her breath. He'll never know who the killer was. I stayed quiet, sensing she needed to speak. He always thought my taste in books was frivolous, you know? A bitter laugh escaped her. Contemporary fiction, he called. It airport literature said I should stick to the classics if I wanted to read anything at all. She swirled the wine in her glass, watching it catch the light. That's how it was, these last few years. Comfortable, safe, separate rooms, separate books, separate lives under the same roof. Her voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly she was crying, deep, racking sobs that seemed to surprise her. As much as they did me, the wine glass trembled in her hand. I gently took it, setting it on the coffee table. I haven't cried, she managed between breaths. Not since the funeral. Not even then, really. I had to be strong for Ethan, for everyone. Had to handle everything perfectly, like always. Without thinking, I moved closer. She turned toward me, and I opened my arms slightly, an invitation, not an assumption. She leaned into my shoulder, her body shaking with suppressed sobs. I held her carefully, one hand moving in slow circles on her back, the way my mother used to comfort me when I was small. Her hair smelled like lavender, soft against my chin. I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt, her fingers curled into the fabric at my chest. Gradually, her breathing steadied, but she didn't pull. Away immediately. When she finally lifted her head, our faces were inches apart. This close, I could see the silver threads in her dark hair catching the lamplight, count the freckles across her nose that her makeup usually concealed. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clearer now, and as they met mine, I felt her breath catch. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, and the air between us changed, became charged with something that made my heart stumble in its rhythm. I felt the weight of that moment like a physical thing, the space between us electric with unspoken possibilities. Her eyes held mine, then dropped to my lips again, and I found myself holding my breath. My hand was still on her back, and I could feel her heartbeat racing beneath my palm. Madeline pulled away first, though her hand stayed pressed against my chest. I should go, she whispered, but didn't move. Her fingers curled slightly in my shirt, as if fighting between holding on and letting go. When she finally stood, her hand trailed down my arm, lingering there. This is ... complicated, she said, her voice unsteady. More complicated than just grief or loneliness. The way she said it felt like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I know, I replied softly, because I did. Complicated. Wasn't nearly enough to describe what was building between us, this thing that felt both inevitable and impossible. She left quickly after that. The door closing behind her with a quiet click that felt somehow final. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty wine glasses on my coffee table. My skin still warm where she touched me. The next night, she didn't come. I tried to work. But my sketches came out wrong, proportions slightly off, lines not quite straight. I'd catch myself staring at my phone, willing it to buzz with a message from her. I burned my dinner, too distracted by memories of her lavender scent, the weight of her head on my shoulder, to notice the smoke until my alarm went off. I picked up my phone a dozen times to text Ethan, but what would I say? Hey, I think I'm falling for your mother. The thought alone made my stomach twist with guilt. The second night without her was worse. I agreed to drinks with some colleagues, hoping it would help clear my head. The bar was crowded, full of Friday night energy that felt abrasive against my mood. I nursed one beer, barely listening to stories about difficult clients and deadline pressures. You okay, man? Asked Mike from the sustainability team. You seem somewhere else tonight. I made some excuse about a challenging project and left early. The night was cool, and I found myself walking not toward home, but in the Direction of her hotel. I passed it twice, looking up at the lit windows, wondering which one was hers. Both times I kept walking. What right did I have to be there? What could I possibly say? The third evening, I'd almost convinced myself that her absence was permanent. Probably for the best, I told myself, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. I was attempting to focus on a materials specification document when I heard it. Soft but distinct. Impossible to mistake for anyone else's. When I opened the door, my breath caught. She was wearing a simple black dress instead of her usual casual clothes, her hair falling in soft waves around her face. She looked beautiful and uncertain, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice steadier than I expected. I think we need to talk about what's happening between us. She met my eyes directly. Really talk about it, honestly, before either of us does something we can't take back. I stepped back to let her in, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. This wasn't like our other evenings. There was no wine, no pretense of casual conversation. Whatever happened next would change everything. And we both knew it. She moved to her usual spot on the couch, but didn't sit, turning to face me instead. The city lights through my windows cast a soft glow around her, and I was struck again by how right she looked here. In my space, even as everything about this felt impossibly wrong. "We should probably talk," I agreed, closing the door behind. Me, knowing this conversation would either end whatever was growing between us or become the beginning of something neither of us had expected to find. I led her to my small kitchen table, the one tucked against the wall beneath a pendant light. That suddenly felt too harsh for this kind of conversation. I dimmed it slightly, then busied myself making tea. Chamomile. I remembered she'd mentioned it helped her sleep. The familiar motions gave my hand something to do while my heart raced ahead of itself. She wrapped her fingers around the steaming mug when I set it before her, and I noticed she'd removed her rings. The tan line was still visible, but fainter now. I sat across from her, the wooden table between us like neutral territory. "This is impossible," she began softly, her eyes fixed on the rising steam. "You know that, don't you?" She took a careful breath. He'd feel betrayed by both of us. His mother and his college friend. It would destroy him. Her fingers tightened around the mug. And he's already lost so much. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. She clearly rehearsed this, probably during those 2 days away. The age difference. Alone, ... She shook her head. 18 years, Ryan. I'm old enough to be friends with your mother. I probably am the same age as some of your colleagues' mothers. A small, sad laugh escaped her. And the timing? People would talk. They'd say I'm not grieving properly, that I'm having some kind of breakdown. Maybe they'd be right. She looked up at me then. What if this isn't even real? What if it's just ... Grief, looking for comfort wherever it can find it. The kitchen felt quiet except for the soft hum of my refrigerator. I'd let her say everything she needed to say. Now it was my turn. I haven't been able to think about anything else, I admitted. My voice low but steady. Not just since that night you cried. Since before that. The way you understood my work without me having to explain. How you make me laugh when I least expect it. You're mine, Madeline? The way you see things I miss entirely. I lean forward slightly. I know the risks. I understand exactly how. This looks from the outside. But I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel just because it's inconvenient or complicated. She held my gaze for what felt like minutes, though it was probably only seconds. Then almost whispered, I feel it too. Her hand uncurled from her mug, resting palm on the table between us. Since that first night, when you played for me, maybe even before that at all those dinners and gatherings, but I never let myself. Think about it then. We sat there in the dim kitchen light, her words hanging in the air between us. Neither of us moved to bridge the small space across the table, both understanding that once we did, there would be no going back. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. Maybe we should take some time. Think this through more carefully. No. Madeline's voice was soft but firm. I've done nothing but think for 3 days. lying awake in that hotel room, walking. Through the park, sitting in cafes, just ... thinking. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger. I have a different suggestion. The pendant light caught the auburn highlights in her hair as she looked up at me. One evening, just this one, to explore whatever this is between us without worrying about tomorrow or what anyone would say. Her eyes held mine. No promises. Beyond tonight, no expectations except honesty. Are you certain? I asked, my throat tight. Because if you're not, she answered by standing, pushing her chair back with quiet determination. 2 steps brought her around the table to where I sat. When she held out her hand, I noticed it wasn't trembling anymore. Turn off this light? She whispered. It's too bright for what I want to say. I reached over and flicked the switch, plunging us into the gentler darkness of my apartment. Streetlights filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor as she led me to the living room. We stood facing each other, and I could hear the soft sound of her breathing, smell the lingering scent of her perfume. Her hand found my face in the semi-darkness, thumb tracing along my cheekbone with a touch so light it made me shiver. This is my choice, she said. My terms? I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking for now. When she kissed me, there was nothing uncertain about it. No hesitation. No trace of the grief-stricken woman who appeared at my door that first night. This was Madeline making a decision, and I felt the weight of her certainty in the way she drew me closer. The deliberate press of her lips against mine. The small sound she made when I wrapped my arms around her waist. The kiss deepened slowly, like sinking into warm water. When we finally broke apart, she buried her face against my neck, her breath warm on my skin. I want to stay, she whispered. Really stay. If you're comfortable with that. My heart thundered in my chest as I took her hand, leading her further into the apartment. We both knew we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross, but in that moment, with the city lights painting patterns across her face and her fingers intertwined with mine, it felt like the only possible choice. I woke to unfamiliar warmth beside me, my mind taking a moment to process the gentle sound of someone else's breathing. Madeline. The memories of last night filtered back slowly. Each careful touch. Each whispered question. Each soft answer between us. The dawnlight caught in her dark hair, spread across my pillow, and I watched how it transformed her face. She looked peaceful now. The worry lines smoothed away. None of the tension that had marked her features since that first evening at my DOOR. I slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake her. My apartment felt different, somehow charged with meaning I wasn't ready to examine too closely. In the kitchen, I started the coffee maker, its familiar burble grounding me in the ordinary, while my thoughts tried to make sense of the extraordinary. The sound of bare feet on hardwood made me turn. Madeline stood in the doorway, wearing my wrinkled dress shirt. And for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. Gone was the composed curator, the confident woman who'd made such a deliberate choice last night. This Madeline tucked her hair behind her ear, crossed her arms over her chest, and gave me a shy smile that made my heart twist. Coffee? I asked softly, and she nodded. I poured 2 mugs, and, on impulse, led her to the fire escape. We settled on the metal, grating, shoulders touching, legs dangling over the edge. Below us, the city was waking up, delivery trucks making their rounds. Early joggers dodging around trash bins. A woman walking her dog while talking on her phone. We sat in silence for a long time. But it felt different from our previous quiet moments. More complete somehow, as if we'd moved past the need for careful distance. Her coffee cooled in her hands as she watched the sunrise paint the buildings in gold. I need to go back to the hotel, she said finally. Pack my things. Figure out what comes next. What does that mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. For this? For us? She turned to look at me, her green eyes clear and direct. I don't know, she admitted. But I promise you complete honesty with Ethan, with myself, and especially with you. She set her mug down, the ceramic scraping against metal. I need time to grieve properly, to understand what's real and what's just ... She paused, searching for the right words. What's real and what's just me trying to escape the pain? The morning air had turned cool, and I noticed goosebumps on her arms beneath my shirt. But she didn't move to go inside, and I didn't suggest it. We stayed there, watching the city wake up, both understanding that this moment, like last night, was precious precisely because it couldn't last. The morning stretched into an awkward dance of gathering clothes and avoiding eye contact. Madeline changed in my bathroom while I straightened the living room unnecessarily. Both of us trying to find our footing in the bright reality of day. I'll call Ethan today, she said, smoothing her wrinkled black dress. Tell him I've been spending time with you. She caught my worried glance and added, not everything, not yet. Just that we've been talking, that you've been kind. I could talk to him, I offered, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't right. I mean, if you think, no, she said gently. This is my responsibility, my choice to explain. She adjusted her purse strap, keys jingling. I need to handle the estate. Paperwork, go home, face the empty house. Really face it this time. We stood by my door, that threshold we'd crossed so many times in the past week. The morning light caught the auburn in her hair, and I fought the urge to touch it one last time. I need time, she said, her voice soft but sure. A month, maybe. 2. To understand what's real and what's just ... Grief looking for comfort. She met my eyes. You deserve that clarity. We both do. I crossed to my kitchen counter where my spare key lay. I'd been thinking about this since waking, turning the idea over like a worry stone. Here, I said, holding it out. Whenever you're ready, weeks, months, whatever you need. You can come back. She took the key, her fingers brushing mine. I can't promise when. I pause. Or if, I know. She stepped closer, then one hand coming up to touch my face. When she kissed me, it was gentle, a punctuation mark rather than a question. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. I sat with my guitar afterward, playing that same piece from the first night she'd visited. The notes felt different now, weighted with memory. I thought about her face when she'd first heard it, how the music had given her permission to feel something besides grief. The next few days, I threw myself into work. My designs evolved without my conscious direction, every building suddenly incorporating elements from our conversations. Reading nooks tucked into unexpected corners. Breakfast spaces oriented to catch the morning light. Rooms that seemed incomplete until you imagined 2 people sharing them. I found myself wondering if I just complicated her healing process or if we'd stumbled onto something genuine and rare. The question lived in every line I drew, every space I designed, while I waited to see if she'd use that key. 3 months crawled by like honey in winter. Madeline's text messages arrived sporadically, updates about estate paperwork. Lawyer meetings, decisions about the house. I sent back photos of my completed projects, careful to keep my responses light, professional, just enough to maintain our connection without pressure. Ethan called occasionally, mostly to talk about work or mutual friends. During one conversation, he mentioned his mother seemed different lately. I can't explain it, he said. She's still sad, obviously, but lighter somehow, like she's starting to find her way back. That's good, I managed, my throat tight. She deserves to heal. Yeah, he agreed. She does. The evening it happened, I was reviewing blueprints at my drafting table. Spring had finally surrendered to summer, and my windows were open to catch the warm breeze. Instead of the usual knock, I heard a key turning in my lock. Madeline stood in the doorway, a small suitcase beside her. Her smile, God, that smile. It wasn't the careful one I remembered from dinner parties, or the fragile one from those first grief-shadowed visits. This belonged entirely to her. I sold the house, she said simply. Found an apartment 10 blocks from here. The Contemporary Art Gallery on 4th Street offered me a curator position. She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. I told Ethan about us last week. My heart stopped. How did He's angry, confused. She moved closer, But I think he'll understand eventually. When he sees this isn't some crisis decision. Her hands were trembling slightly as she reached for mine. I'm terrified, she admitted. This might be the biggest mistake of my life, but I'm choosing it anyway, choosing to try. I pulled her inside to the same spot where she'd first asked to return months ago. But everything felt different now, deliberate rather than desperate, a beginning rather than an escape. I took her suitcase, just one small carry-on, the kind you'd pack for a long weekend. She hadn't brought much, just enough to test these waters we were wading into together. The thought made me smile. We were both being careful, deliberate. Thai food? I suggested, already reaching for my phone. From our usual place? Perfect. She settled onto the couch, looking more at home than she had that first nervous night. I have news about the gallery position? While we waited for delivery, she told. Me about the contemporary art space, her eyes lighting up as she described upcoming exhibitions she'd helped curate. It feels like ... finding myself again, she said softly. After so many years of being just Thomas's wife, just Ethan's mother. She showed me photos of her new apartment on her phone bright windows, hardwood floors, empty walls waiting for art. It needs personality, she admitted. But that's the point, isn't it? Fresh start? When I asked about Ethan, her expression turned thoughtful. He's processing. Angry, yes, but he's still calling, still talking. That's something. The food arrived, and we fell into our old rhythm sharing bites, trading stories. As night settled around us, she set down her fork. I spent 3 months wondering if this would feel different, she confessed. If what we had was just grief and need. I worried about that too, I admitted. She stood then, holding out her hand. When I took it, she led us toward my bedroom, our steps slower, more certain than that first night. Later, as we lay tangled in sheets, her fingers traced patterns. On my chest. I choose this, she whispered. Choose you. Whatever we build from here, it's because we want to, not because we're lonely or lost. I pulled her closer, understanding that we were creating something entirely new, something that belonged only to now, to us. If tonight's ending felt right. Hit subscribe and share this with one person who needs a gentle story. I'll be here tomorrow with another.